Hi everyone, Robert Peak here from the Spontaneous Dungeon Master, and I want to talk a little bit about this question that's been going through my head a lot lately, which is when we play a role-playing game, whose fantasy is it? Whose is it? Whose does it belong to? And I think early on it was pretty clear, right? As a sort of pubescent boy in the 80s, there was a kind of standard D&D fantasy, right? It involved rescuing princesses and doing cool magic. And, it was pretty clear cut. It was pretty Lord of the Rings derived. And it was a lot, I think, playing out some of our own anxieties about girls, about growing up, about wanting to be heroes, all of those kinds of things. And the wonderful thing is that D&D has now reached a much, much broader audience. And that's terrific. It means that people are feeding into D&D what their own hopes and dreams and desires and interests are. And that's shaping the game. And I think it's shaping the game for the better. And I think dungeon masters that are open-minded and are willing to be spontaneous and willing to go with what their players want, willing to answer that question, what is yours? What do you want to get out of this? With with positive, open-minded approaches to creating adventures, right? Adventures that may be wildly different than the ones that we kind of pine for in our sort of nostalgic, remembering the Stranger Things kind of days ways. But I think we got to let that go, frankly. I think it's, sort of mid-career, graphic designer coming home, on a Friday night, and pouring a glass of wine and settling up to a D&D session. She's not necessarily going to be all that interested in rescuing your princess. It's not the game she wants to play, right? She wants to be this amazing, tiefling warlock that gets to take it out on, some of the looks a little bit like some of the guys at her ad agency or whatever, right? She wants to Eldritch Blast something into space. Or she wants to, go on this kind of, whole other rich, interesting RP focused, adventure or this intrigue thing or whatever it is. We're seeing a lot of different races being played, right? It's not just your traditional, dwarf, elf, and halfling. People are gravitating to the Aarakocras and the Furbolgs and all kinds of stuff because, in a way, they sort of don't know any better that these are unusual races, right? Because they didn't necessarily grow up on this whole kind of, Lord of the Rings, sort of pseudo fake Ren Fair middle ages kind of world that's so much a fabrication anyway, so much just a manufactured thing from our kind of 80s mainstream society that did frankly so much marginalize anything that wasn't that. And now we're bringing all that back in, and it's amazing and it's rich and it's wonderful. And I think we need to accommodate it, and we need to ask ourselves, whose fantasy is this? It's everyone that shows up at the table. It's what they want. It's what they're interested in. And at the same time, the DM factors into that, right? So I come with my preconceived notions and whatever, and I had to really let go of a lot of those, frankly, to be with the players as they are and what they want. At the same time, I've often said, to me, DMing is a bit like throwing a dinner party, right? Like I'm bringing the guests together. I'm preparing the meal. I want to have something at the table that's everyone's favorite dish and just what they like and just the way that they want it. I want to prepare that and give them that feast. But at the same time, that's not necessarily being spontaneous. That's not necessarily being open to new things being kind of discovered and developing. And also, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these dinner parties where the host never sits down, like they never actually partake of the meal. They're so busy fussing over everyone else and hovering around, making sure everyone else is happy. They kind of forget to feed themselves even in the moment. That can definitely lead to DM burnout in itself. So I think you need to factor yourself in as one of the players, but also very much be aware of any of this potentially, particularly for us grognards, any kind of baggage we bring about what D&D should be. And show up and see what's there. The fantasy is all of ours. The fantasy is what we create collectively, and everyone brings a piece to that that is different. And new players come with fresh eyes, and in a way, that's kind of amazing. I talked a little bit about younger players in another one of these videos and what they bring to the experience, being such naturally improvisational beings already as they are. And I think new players bring us this opportunity to see the game with fresh eyes, to respond to that in the moment, to improvise together, to create stories that we never would have necessarily dreamed of, and to make it be satisfying. the character isn't you, but as one of my poetry mentors said about the difference between the author and the speaker in a poem, they certainly know a lot about you, right? They certainly are sometimes aspects of you playing out. That's why they're so incredibly precious, oftentimes so valuable, so interesting. That's why the stakes are sometimes so high in these games, and we get these RPG horror stories, and we're so shocked by them, right? Is that this is a vehicle for something really, really precious, I think, in the human experience, which is having these fantasies that sometimes are heroic, sometimes are just letting off steam, sometimes are just what they are, but can be, for whatever they are, incredibly powerful, incredibly cathartic. So be mindful. It's not just yours, but it's not just all theirs either. It's this shared fantasy. It's our fantasy. Um, and it doesn't need to have all this baggage of what D&D used to be on it. It can really be a living thing that you adapt to moment to moment. And at the end of the day, it's a shared story. It's whatever those five people brought as ingredients. That becomes the special sauce, the stew, the thing that we're all going to partake of that evening. So whose fantasy is it? It's everybody's fantasy. And more than just a fantasy, it's an opportunity to also explore what other people are bringing to the experience. And that in itself, I think, is absolutely precious.